Utah is still trying to land five-star receiver from the state of Utah, Jerome Myles, but he just moved up his commitment date after a recent visit to USC. Is it time to panic? Let's talk about Utah's chances on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network and available wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube or wherever on any podcast platform. On today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. You can visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department, and unfortunately, things are not looking great for the Utah Utes, not as it pertains to the 24 season, but as it pertains to their 2025 recruiting efforts, because there was a little bit of a negative snag in the recruitment of Jerome Myles. And joining me to talk about that is friend of the show, Moose Bingham, recruiting expert, as well as former Utah kicker. And Moose, this is a bad, the recruiting game so well. I just feel like this is a really bad sign. Takes the visit to USC recently, and then has moved his commitment date up from October 31st or whatever it was to this upcoming Saturday, September. I just blanked on the name of it, but it's like very soon. Like, it's a very concerning trend. And we even see some expert 24/7 Sports has flipped Myles. They're saying that they now think he's going to go to USC. There's been other sites that now predict him to go to USC, like On3. It feels like Utah might be letting that elite receiver we were really hoping they were going to land slip through their fingers.
Yeah, USC is kind of it's a thorn in the heel of the University of Utah, because they take great players like Jay Tufele. Jay Tufele was committed to Utah silently. He was signing day. They were waiting for him to sign his LOI, and all of a sudden USC came in saying sweet nothings into his ear, and all of a sudden he's over at USC. And we're seeing the same thing happen to Jerome Myles, where he was a major Utah lean. He's saying, yeah, this is where I want to be. You guys have my quarterback. You have my O-lineman. And now USC is stepping in and once again taking top-tier talent from the state of Utah. And they're saying, hey, we've got Jerome. And they just had Ami Mawala commit to them as well, the phenomenal defensive lineman from Bingham. So USC, they're flexing their muscles, not just because of that, but because of who they have on staff. They have Dog Ama'a, who was a recruiting assistant at Utah, shot right across the bow, bringing him in there. And they have Sean Nua, who is a phenomenal recruiter, great in the Polynesian community. And he's saying, hey, we got to go to the state of Utah. We got to get kids out of there. So we're not playing them, and they're playing for us. Because recruiting, there's a double-edged sword there. It's not just, hey, we got to get this kid. It's, hey, we got to make sure this team doesn't have this kid. And Utah not having Jerome Myles, it takes away a complexity of the offense that we haven't seen before. So Utah could still come in and say, hey, we will give you A, B, C, D, E, F, all the way through theta, gamma, and delta to come on in. So the fight's not over. It's not over till the pen hits the ink and it signs that letter of intent. And you can see that with Jerome. He's already been committed to Ole Miss. Then he decommitted. Then he committed. He's been a silent verbal to Utah. Then he's not a silent verbal to Utah. Mm-hmm. So it's a very fickle thing. And I'm really excited for Jerome. He's a great young man. He's got a lot of opportunities for him. And hopefully it works out for him wherever he goes. But if not, Utah will always be in the back of his mind saying, hey, I can always go home and have a great career there. And that's the thing with Utah. They've got to keep recruiting him, even if he commits. Say, hey, you can always come back, go there, party it up for a year, and then spend 3 years and be like Puka Nacua for BYU and do what you got to do. But then when you're ready to ball out and be a Ute, we're here for you with open arms.
Yeah, it seems like I agree with you. I just think it's going to be very hard whenever the tide turns like this. These these recruiting experts know, right? And especially when you think about someone probably listening, it's like, oh, hey, a while ago, you guys were talking about when that one expert logged Jerome, when he locked in Jerome to Utah. That was a long time ago. And we're talking about high school kids. I mean, everyone did this with their college decision, right? It's a massive decision. So it's a fluid process. You're going to change your mind. And look, if Utah doesn't end up landing Myles, it sucks. But at the end of the day, it's if you were to say, hey, if you're a wide receiver, you want to go play at USC or you want to go play at Utah, like there's just only so much Utah can do compared to what USC will offer. Because when you think what's USC known for, throwing the ball with great quarterback plays, with great quarterback play. When you are really good throwing the ball with great quarterback play, your receivers are involved a lot. And there's not many offensive minded people. And I know Utah fans are like, oh, we beat up on Lincoln Riley. We have, but they're just a fact. Like there's not many offensive minds that are better in college football today than Lincoln Riley. Every time I turn on a USC game, I'm always impressed with it. Some form of innovation or something they are doing, Moose. So I know some people will see this as maybe a bad look on Utah. And we can even talk about a second, like has the first two games, when we heard about this offense being more explosive, once again, it hasn't exactly been there, the passing numbers that we were hoping for. But I do just think this is more so like, hey, a chance to be a receiver versus USC and Utah, and more so a chance to be a receiver with Lincoln Riley than Andy Ludwig. And history has shown us that that is a much more fruitful position.
Mm. Well, it's very interesting. And we still have great receivers coming in. I mean, Tavian McNair from Centennial, California, he's coming in. He's a great talent.
Yeah.
The sky isn't falling. And what's even
Oh.
better is we can go into 14 personnel and it doesn't freaking matter. We can have 4 tight ends, 1 running back, and let's freaking go.
Yeah.
So it's like Utah, they're built on defense, they're built on the running game, and it's hard to escape that identity. And it's hard to be like, okay, there's been players that have come in and done really well. Talk about like a Steve Smith came in, did really well, but he was a 3rd round draft pick. He wasn't a 1st round draft pick. You see these guys and you're like, hey, where am I going to go that's going to set me up in the NFL? And USC just has so many guys where you're just like, oh my gosh, if I go to USC, I can play in the Big Ten. I can do what I need to. I can play in these marquee games. And the pitch is really good. And there's more money at USC than they know what to do with.
Yeah.
Because you're in LA, you've got a rabid fan base that has pockets deeper than the Grand Canyon. And it's very interesting. Utah can play the game. They just need a couple of the boosters to say, hey, we want to play this game. We want to get in it and let's go. But I don't know if they have that yet.
Yep. And like you said, it's just tough to outbid any Big 10 versus a Big 12 team. It's just tough, especially when that team is USC. And that's incredibly tough. We already mentioned the receiver aspect. So we'll just say this briefly, Moose. So far, Utah's leading receiver on the year is a running back, John Stanley. Now, I think that's more matchups than anything, right? But you look at Utah's receivers, Money Parks, 4 receptions through 2 games. Brant Keithy, 5 receptions through 2 games. Dorian Singer, 5 receptions through 2 games. None of those players over 100 yards for Utah receivers. How much do you think of Utah's? I will say this. I don't think it mattered that much through the first 2 games. Maybe slightly it did, but I still think it's more so USC versus Utah overall rather than overreacting to a 2-game sample size. But how much do you think the passing game slow start might impact Myles or any of these recruits?
I don't think it does at all because it's not really a 2-game sample size. You're looking at a 1-game sample size in all reality with Cam Rising playing 1 total game, 4 quarters. And you've got Isaac Wilson playing 4 quarters. And so Isaac Wilson, he's extremely talented. Utah is insanely lucky to have him. And he's still a freshman. He's still going to make mistakes. He's still figuring it out. And he's figuring it out fast. I saw a ton of improvement in him from game 1 to game 2. And I expect to see that a massive leap from game 2 to game 3. But were we expecting Isaac Wilson to come in and be the starting quarterback by game 3? Heck no. But are we happy that you have him? Yes. Are we happy that the future is bright? Yes. And there's going to be a ton of players that want to play with Isaac Wilson because he's going to be proven by the end of the season. I see him as a much better form of a Maddox Madsen that's at Boise State already, where you can have that elite running back and then he can find the open receivers very quickly, very concisely, and get done what he needs to. So I'm seeing this Utah offense as a huge bright spot. Most of these linemen are returning. Most of these running backs are returning. We're going to have some great tight ends, a quarterback entrenched in the future. I mean, the sun is bright and beautiful over those Wasatch Mountains that shine upon the University of Utah.
It is. I still think people have been really quick to judge and criticize Isaac, and it is amazing how quickly people forget like growth over the course of a season, especially the year 1 to year 2 jump that these guys so frequently make. So really excited to see Isaac continued growth. We obviously think he's going to end up playing against Utah State this Saturday. And speaking of this Saturday's game, we're 2 weeks into Utah football season now, so time to look back on some of our big questions and just look at this team overall and talk about what we like about them, what we want to see more from them. That's what we're going to be discussing in one moment. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at Factor. You can fuel up with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor Fresh's never frozen meal are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. You can make the day you kickstart a new healthy routine. What are you waiting for? With 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week, you'll always have a new flavor to explore. You can truly crush your wellness goals with this May dietitian approved meals and ingredients that you trust. You can enjoy effortless support for your lifestyle. Choose from 6 menu preferences to help you manage calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meats, or simply eat a more well-balanced meal. Head to factormeals.com/lockedoncollege. That's lowercase and then the number 50 at the end, lockedoncollege50. And you can use the code lockedoncollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code lockedoncollege50 at factormeals.com to get that 20% off next month while your subscription is active. Head over to Factor today. Also want to talk with you all about our great friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. The college football season is rolling on, and FanDuel has you covered with everything you need to get you ready for the big games. And FanDuel even is offering you something a little different that allows you to watch the big games, because we know FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, of course. I've said that a lot. But did you know that FanDuel now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. And if that's not enough, be sure to check out FanDuel's profit boost in the app and use it for FanDuel's double your winnings for all Sundays, 9 through the 15th. Pre-game moneyline bets profile boosts will be live starting Thursday, the 12th of September. You can view your account page now to learn more about these boosts. So if you're looking at college football, NFL, MLB baseball, FanDuel is the place to be. So just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. Once again, head over today and download FanDuel, because FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Moose Bingham back with me here as we continue to talk about Utah football. We talked about some recruiting, not the greatest trend for Utah that they're more than likely going to miss on Myles based on these reports, but also like what you said, Moose, never say never. But one thing that we don't have to worry about is one thing we can focus on right now, I'll say, is the present of Utah football. And I believe the present of this team is incredibly bright. We'll talk about the offense in a moment. Moose, this Utah defense has just been incredible. I mean, the players they lost last year, Cole Bishop, Sione Vaki, Jonah Ellis, like, you're not supposed to look this good when you use players of that caliber. And this defense, to me, is the best unit in the Big 12. It's ranked 7th right now. I think they got a great chance to be a top 5 defense over the course of the year. They're big up front. They can rush the passer. The linebackers are electric, and the secondary is pretty stingy. And there's some good depth at each level of the field, too. So you got guys like Vaimahi and Johnson go down, and you don't really even blink an eye because you get so many other guys who step up and contribute. And we shouldn't be surprised, I guess, because it's Morgan Scalley and all the other elite coordinators Utah has. But, man, this defense has been even better than I thought they would be.
Well, how about the resurgence of Van Fillinger out of nowhere?
Oh, yes.
I was insanely impressed with Van Fillinger. Already has, I think, 1.5 sacks on the season, maybe 2.
He's actually him and he leads the Big 12 in sacks. He's top 10 in the nation in sacks. Connor's second. Connor and Van are 1 and 2 in the Big 12, and I think they each have 3 apiece.
Yeah, I was looking. I thought it was 5.5 total between the two of them, which is absolutely just
Yeah.
ridiculous. So you're seeing these guys get around the edge, and we're not even talking about Logan Fano or Paul Fitzgerald. Like, there's
Yeah.
other guys there that you're like, oh, okay, we've got other dogs just sitting there. The interior of these D tackles, Junior Tafuna and Keanu Tanuvesa, you're like, wow, these guys are awesome. And there's so many seniors. And I love watching Peppa and Fotu.
Yeah, Peppa
And
was so good last weekend.
oh my gosh, you're just like, oh, this is the Utah D line that we love to watch. And the linebackers. Can't say enough about Lander Barton. Can't say enough about Corrine Reed. And Sione Fotu is coming into his own as well, which I didn't see it coming. I was like, whoa, Sione Fotu, my Bingham brother that went on a mission to Portland, Oregon? Let's freaking go. And so there's a lot of experience and there's a lot of fun things going on in the linebacking core where we've got 2 juniors and 1 senior, and then we've got some sophomores behind them. So I'm excited for all of these guys. And you're just like, okay, this is a senior heavy defense. This defense can carry this team into the Big 12 championship. Let's not even worry about offense to start out with. When you've got a back end of Eli Gilman and Nate Ritchie and Keenan Johnson and Smith Snowden, I mean, we did lose a corner, but it
Yeah,
didn't
Johnson.
matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Johnson, we lost Johnson, but we're like, we're okay. It's not like we have a running back playing corner anymore.
Yeah, that's the truth. Johnson was a nice veteran presence for this team, but they didn't miss a beat without Baylor against Baylor without him out there. Like, that's just a credit to the coaching staff of the development that they have out here. And I love this is something I talked about earlier on my show this week. Utah can literally ride this defense to the Big 12 championship game. If something happened with Cam and he would not be able to play at all this season, Utah absolutely is still capable of reaching the Big 12 championship game because this defense has a chance to absolutely suffocate teams, even if they were to lose to Oklahoma State. Like, first of all, this is what I also think is funny because I got push back on this earlier in the week. You guys could check it out on the Locked On College Football thing. Like, people are like, oh, we're not that impressed with Utah. Like, Cam got hurt, all these things like that. Like, sure, whatever. But how can you be impressed with any Big 12 team? Like, if you're going to nitpick Utah, Oklahoma State went in an ugly game against Arkansas, and we still don't really even know how good that Arkansas team is. Kansas lost to Illinois. That was everyone's Big 12 darling. It's going to be so good this year. And then everyone's talking about how bad Jalen Daniels was. And then you get Oklahoma State. And then you get Kansas State, who's squeaking it out against Tulane. Utah, yes, I understand when Isaac's in the game, the offense has not been seamless, but like, they were on the cusp of blowing out Baylor until the injuries happened. So I've just been so impressed with this Utah team overall. And shifting to the offensive side of the ball, I think we still need to see a little bit more, right? I think Cam's played pretty well, still shaking off the rust a little bit, though. I would say the offensive line is coming together. There's moments like, hey, that last drive against Baylor, oh, it was fantastic. But you look earlier when Isaac gets in, and a lot of the moments where Isaac falters is when the offensive line fails to pick up a twist, when the offensive line lets the defensive lineman gets his hands up to knock down the ball. So they're still coming together as well, too. But I do feel like this Utah team is moving in a positive direction. And I feel like we already talked about the defense is fantastic. I still feel really good about all the weapons. I think Andy Ludwig's offense has looked really good with Cam under center. And I still have full belief in this team to do everything they set out to do. And that's just not winning the Big 12. I do think this team is capable of making a run in the college football playoff.
Yeah, I do too. The other thing is when you have a star player go down, it just doesn't it's not like you're missing a player. You're missing the heartbeat of the team. So, for example, Jerome Myles going down at Corner Canyon when they played Lone Peak. You're like, everyone's like, oh no, Jerome went down. I'm like, you guys still have a 3-star receiver here. You've got a 3-star receiver here. You've got a ton of talent around. They're like, but Jerome is down. And I felt like we saw the same thing when Cam Rising went down at Utah. They're like, all of our hopes and dreams rest on this one player. And it's like, no, you've got the next man up. It's going to be okay. But I watched a Corner Canyon team that put up 35 points effortlessly go, and they couldn't put up more than 7 all of a sudden in a half. And you're like, what happened? But the next week they bounced back. They played Farmington. They went and they put up 42 points, no problem. And I think we're going to see the same thing from Utah. When Isaac's getting all the reps, when he's not just going in for mop-up time, we're going to put a couple offensive schemes in for Isaac. Isaac, it looks like it's hard for you to do X, Y, and Z. That's why we're going to do A, B, and C. And we're going to make it easy for you. But it's hard to do that in the middle of the game. And we even saw it in the kicking game. That was crazy to watch, where we have one of the best kickers in the country, in my opinion, in Cole Becker. And all of a sudden we're like, well, let's give Trey Coleman a try right now because Becker's having a tough day. And it seemed like everyone was having a tough day. And I'm glad that Utah had a lead going into that, but it seemed like it was a little bit tough just emotionally for everyone. And we have to be able to take those emotions and make it through the games.
I love that you brought up the point about how deflating it can be on the sideline because, Moose, you are, of course, someone who is on the sideline and dealt with things like this when there is a massive injury and what a change that is. So I just put so much more stock into you saying that than whoever says, like, oh, the offense was so bad, like I'm so nervous about it. It's completely different when the game plan is designed for Isaac. Kyle Whittingham has said he gets 20% of the reps in practice. He will now be getting 80% of the reps in practice in preparation for what we believe will be him starting against Utah State. So still feeling really good about this team as we do kind of a temperature check 2 weeks in. I think the offense is still trending in a positive direction. And I do think last year we saw Andy Ludwig with a backup QB and still average 20 points per game. That's what we're going to see. It will even more than that, I think, against Utah State. So optimistic about what this team is able to do. And yes, we're not feeling the most optimistic about recruiting right now with some of the recent Jerome Myles trends, but Moose, with the way the class of 2026 is looking, we have got to talk about how some of these game-changing players and how some of the other best players in the state of Utah, who will soon hopefully be Utah Utes, are performing a few weeks into the high school football season. That's what we're going to be discussing in one moment. But first, I want to talk with you all about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes. It's our great friends at LinkedIn Talent Solutions. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you find the best candidates for your job that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role in a given month. Over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're simply looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. You can hire a professional like a professional with LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is so well trusted by small businesses that 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's all caps, no spaces. LinkedIn.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, Moose, let's close this one out by talking about a little bit of high school football, something you and I both absolutely love. Who have been some of the biggest names that have stood out to you to begin the 2024 season?
So there's been a lot, to be honest. You got me thinking about the 2026 class. Brock Harris has just been an absolute menace. And if Utah wants to keep the tight end position going, Brock Harris has to be their number one prospect. He's a 5-star kid. Nationally, he's 25. In his position, he's number 2. And he's the number one prospect in the state. He's out of St. George. He is massive, 6'6", 240. And I think that's a little bit small as what he's listed. I think he's bigger than that. Then you've got Botmui Tolo. We used to call him the Ninja Turtle. Now I call him the Juggernaut because once he gets going, nothing can stop him. He is an absolute dog. Coming in at 6'4", 275, he's playing defensive end. And you're just seeing him at D end and you're like, this kid could be a monstrous 3 technique. We're talking Starlo Tulele, Halode Nada in high school is what I'm seeing from Botmui Tolo, and then some. The kid is an absolute dude. And I think it's going to come down to an in-state battle for him between BYU and Utah. And Utah's positioning themselves really, really well right now. Then Salisi Moa, another 4-star. Ben Moa has had 2 kids, one committed to Utah for a little bit. Both of them are BYU, but Salisi Moa saw his dad playing at Utah. He's been a Utah fan his whole life. They've got a great opportunity to land him. Other players, Helaman Kasuga has still been really, really interesting for me. Another player there, Isun Tafa. Isun, the offensive lineman at Corner Canyon. I'm just like, this kid's an absolute dude. And you've got Ami Moala, who just committed to USC. We'll see if he stays there. The Pula twins, Taden Kava'a, another quarterback that I love out of Orem, and Keu Akana. Keu Akana, his dad was an NBA agent. He knows the game, but he's a kid at 6'3", 200 pounds that could come in and be the next great linebacker or receiver for the University of Utah. He's an SEC-type player that's going under the radar, I think. Isa Nalier is another kid that I really like. Coniel Sweetwine. Siake Fekatoa could be a great running back for Utah. I mean, this 2026 class, you just go on and on. Trayden Bessinger, Malatii Benjamin, the offensive tackle from Skyridge, 6'6", 305, and he's just playing his first varsity snaps this year. Miller Carter, you see all these guys. Kai Wesley, if you want another tight end. Junior Moala at Davis is an awesome player. And Devon Eka as well, another phenomenal running back. So you're just sitting here, you're like, this is the class. This is it. This is where you either make or break the next 10 years between Utah and BYU. If Utah can land this class, they're going to be dominant for the next decade. It doesn't matter who the head coach is. It doesn't matter what's going on because the chess pieces that you have are going to dominate. If BYU sneaks around and lands a class like they did in 2016 or 2010 with this 2026 class, could spell disaster for Utah because they're in the same conference. They don't have the ability anymore to say, hey, we're in a P5 conference and you're not. So this is the most important class. And what's playing in Utah's favor? They're going to have a great season. And on top of that, signing day is in the summer. We're going to have a June signing day. And so with that, you could have a Jerome Myles signed, sealed, and delivered, and he's thinking about other places at the end of the day in November, but it doesn't matter because you already have his LOI, where it's a more complicated process. This is where I'm getting excited because the University of Utah could be going into these kids' senior year with a plethora of them committed, and we're not even talking about the transfer portal as well.
No, we're not. And like you mentioned, it's class 2026. Still remember last year when 24/7 Sports published kind of their first ranking of the top 100 of that class, Utah had 4 guys in it. And that only began to scratch the surface of how many other electric players there would be in that class. So can't wait to see how these guys' season continues to be shaped over the course of the high school football campaign. And Moose, for people who want to hear more about these individual players, as well as just learn more about the recruiting process, where should they head over to?
So 2 places. We've got the Utah Preps podcast. Every week I'm highlighting kids. I'm doing all I can to make sure these kids are known. I mean, this last week, I discovered the cornerbacks from Lone Peak. They've got 2 cornerbacks, 6'2", about 180 apiece, and they both run sub-1100s. And you're just like, wow, these guys are awesome. And then you can go there, or I'm really excited. Recruiting for Parents just released a free version that you guys can get. Go there, learn how to get recruited starting your freshman year. And then if you want, we've got a great price. It's $495 or $497 for the sophomore, junior, senior, and beyond years. So get started with your kids early. 8th grade, you should be talking about recruiting. What do you need to do? What does your schedule need to look like so that you guys can go in and be productive? Because if you have this course, it gives you the blueprint right there to understand the recruiting game. I sit down with families all the time and they say, I wish I would have known this sooner. Don't be that family. Know it now.
Moose, I appreciate you taking the time. As always, you gave us a blueprint today for all things Utah recruiting. So thanks again for stopping by.
No problem. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you guys soon.
All righty, that's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes. Thank you again for Moose for taking the time, and we will be back with you tomorrow's show. Previewing the Utah State game, got Brian Priest from KSL Sports on, who's covered the Aggies done a lot of things for KSL Sports, but also covers the Aggies frequently too. So that is what will be coming up on tomorrow's show. Can't wait to see you all then.